Okay. Okay, so now we are recording. Um, okay. Hi, Melissa. Thank you
Hello.
so much for being here, right? For taking the time to be here. I'm really excited to learn more about you and how you incorporate animals into your OT practice.
Excellent.
Um, so, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background as an OT?
Sure. I am an occupational therapist. I have a pediatric practice in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Although it's mainly pediatric, we do see all ages and abilities. So, um, in our practice, what occupational therapists do is work with people with physical, cognitive, and psychiatric disabilities. So we treat an entire human being all at the same time. Um, Within that, it can be everything from, helping develop strategies for a person who has a spinal cord injury so that they can get dressed or drive a car or whatever the case may be, all the way to individuals who have depression or attention deficit disorder or motor planning issues. So they have a hard time moving their body or paying attention or things like that. So we
Mhm.
do a lot of different things here. I'm also a certified professional dog trainer. I have been training dogs as long as I have been an OT. I trained for 25 years service dogs for people with disabilities, not guide, not hearing, specifically service dogs. And in that 25 years, I've also been training dogs to work with people in occupational therapy, physical therapy, dental clinics, all kinds of different things. And a very large part of my job has been traveling around the world teaching people how to open practices that do what I do, or going into training organizations and teaching them about disabilities, or training them what it is that dogs actually do in somebody's practice. For example, here in our occupational therapy practice, we may have, let's say we've got a 9-year-old kid who has mild cerebral palsy, and they need to work on their arm strength and being able to handle tactile, different sensations on their hand. And we're also working on postural stability. So I might have a dog on one end of the room hanging out on a bed, and on the other end of the room, there's a bowl with kibble. And that kiddo will go and get one of the kibbles, get on a scooter board on their tummy. So they're flying like Superman, and they have to use their hands to propel themselves across the room to get that kibble over to a dog. That same kid, after he makes some progress, we may go and do an agility run. So we have a yard here that is capable of doing agility, and we have the tunnels and the jumps and all of those things. But he has to teach the dog how to do this. So he has to go through the obstacle course himself. So
Yeah.
now we have this 9-year-old kid with CP going through the tunnel and coaxing the dog to follow him. Um, Having him step over or jump over the jumps, and then the dog follows him to do that, et cetera, et cetera. Um, in other settings, when we work with individuals with autism, sometimes we are helping them to understand the perspective of another being and trying to read body language. And a lot of times it's very intimidating to look into another person's eyes or
Yes.
process all of the words that even people who specialize in autism still use too many words a lot of the times.
Mhm.
And everybody's brain processes information at a different rate. So a lot of the times when we're working with dogs, we're looking at their behavior and their responses to the individual with autism so that they can figure out, okay, what is it that this animal really enjoys and what is it that is very confusing? Or if they get stuck on just their own topics and they see that a dog just goes and lays down and is pretty bored with it, then
Mhm.
they have to figure out how to get into dog mind and figure out something that they will both enjoy.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of different ways that we work with the dogs in practice here, and the sky's the limit.
Oh, yes. Wow. That's a lot. And I just feel like it's such a beautiful work, right? Because then you can help people doing something that you really like. You sound so excited about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. So, how did you first get interested in working with animals in therapy?
Well, so my entire life before occupational therapy was working with animals. I was sure that I would be a veterinarian. From the time I was 4 years old, everybody knew that I would be a veterinarian. But the problem was, I began working with veterinarians and I would see how poorly people treated their animals. And I'm a pretty outgoing personality, and I would help them see what it is that they were doing. And I found myself under a lot of stress a lot of times because people weren't taking care of their animals, or, um, and it's not like they were, most people, have legitimate concerns. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I can afford treatment, things like that. But it
Mhm.
was the people that would not treat their animals and say, oh, we can just euthanize this dog and go get another one at the pound.
Okay.
I I would stress out so much that it became toxic for me, and I didn't want to be a part of that. Um, I I've never believed that the world is full of sunshine and puppies. That's not the case, but there has to be a very happy medium in the work that we do. And there's always going to be some difficult things that we do, in our careers or even in our lives, but we all have a threshold, right? And so me being in examining rooms with individuals who didn't want to or
Mhm.
refused to take care of their dogs, um, that was my threshold. I couldn't do it. So the veterinarian that I was working for at the time, had recommended, that I go and hang out with one of his friends that was doing physical therapy in a Veterans Administration hospital. And so I went and hung out there, and I ended up being the pool therapy girl. And so people would come in with spinal cord injuries, and I would help direct and run around and assist people to get movement back, in a gravity lesson to play and all of that. And it was still, pretty painful. These folks are in a lot of pain. They have injuries and they're sore and it's tricky. But I would notice that I would see them in the morning in our sessions, and then I'd see them in the afternoon and they were laughing and having a good time. And it smelled like cookies in this other area. And
Mhm.
so I started investigating that, and it turned out to be occupational therapy, which was a very different functional approach. And OT is where you work with people on goals that are meaningful to them, not what I think is important, but what my clients think are important. I am a wish granter. Tell me what it is that you wish to do, and let's see if we can figure out how to make it happen for you. Well, turns out that one of the big motivators for a lot of clients is dogs, right? When
Mhm.
people are in the hospital, they're missing their dog. And, all of us when we're young have these big dreams of having our own dogs when we grow up, et cetera, et cetera. So, my change in career actually started in my last semester of occupational therapy school, where we had to infuse occupational therapy into something that hadn't really been done before. And
Mhm.
so I actually chose assistance dogs, guide, hearing, and service dogs as an assistive technology option, thinking about how a lot of people who are in wheelchairs don't get as much physical contact just because they're protected by big wheelchairs or walkers or whatever the case may be. And people have a lot of social decline after an injury, illness, or aging, and animals are always very meaningful. So I ended up infusing OT into that kind of thing, and one thing led to another. I ended up with a dog in my practice, and um, that dog was going to be a demo dog for assistive technology. but we had so much fun in the sessions. And this dog loved playing things, ringing bells, and romping and playing with the kids in the sensory room, and on the trampoline, all of these things. It was just so much fun, and it really enriched this dog's quality of life. And
No.
I just happened to be really creative, and I would look at a client's goal and say, okay, we're going to do this. And so if they had cooking skills, like somebody had a stroke and they needed to learn to cook again, but they weren't motivated to cook for themselves, no problem. We're going to make dog treats, and we're going to make those dog treats for your dogs. And then I ended up developing a cooking book for humans and hounds. So that it was making meals that you could actually sit down and eat with your dog. And
No.
so it was all of these different things. And I love the creativity. I love that I was making dogs happy. I love that, kids and grandmas and grandpas were happy. And it just, they always say that you have, your perfect job is one in which you feel like you've never worked a day in your life. And while I'm a very hard worker and always busy, I love what I do, and it lights me up, and it keeps the soul fires burning.
Well, that you are creative, we already know, right? I can see. Knowing you just a little bit, I already see that. And how thoughtful as well, right? And then it was a big change for you, but in a good way, feels like.
Yeah.
So, what kind of training or preparation do the animals need?
So, that's a very tricky thing. I love that you chose the word preparation in there. In the big scheme of things, dogs, as far as training goes, they do need some basic manners. We don't want them knocking people over, or, barking incessantly at somebody, things like that. But the fact is, there are so many different ways to practice, whether you're a mental health provider, a nurse, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, if you work in the juvenile detention center, or if you provide mental health services one-on-one where people are literally sitting there talking to you, those are all very different dogs, very different skill sets. Here in my practice, I have 7 dogs, because no one of them is perfect for every single client that comes in. Each of my dogs, they're not all here at the same time, but each of my dogs has their own caseload, and the dogs get to pick who their clients are. And it's usually based on their age, their experience, the things they enjoy. But it's also based on their aging. We have to think about how quickly dogs age in this process. And really, for working, they're typically only working, if you're doing this from the time they're young, they're only working about 7 or 8 years.
Oh.
And, if we do that kind of math, and I say, okay, my dog's preferences are different between 6 years old and 8 years old, the same way that if I asked you, what were you doing 15 years ago? Are your interests still the same? They're not. And so part of picking the right dog for the job is really understanding the job. And so one of the things that I teach in any of the courses that I teach, whether it's UNF or through Dogwood, or just conferences, is that we have to create profiles. And so I teach people to say, let's look at you as a human, as a handler, as a dog guardian. What are your skills? What's your knowledge? Are you able to really understand communication? So many people think that their dogs are really happy when it's appeasement or things like that. And while we don't expect everybody to be, dog trainers, or, specialists in behavior, there is a certain amount of information that you need in order to do this job
Mhm.
for a lot of reasons. One, we want to keep our animals happy, but um, two, we need to make sure that we are doing no harm. And that means to our clients and to the dogs that we work with, right? So once we understand what our capabilities are, then we build a job description. The same way when I'm hiring an occupational therapist in my practice, I say, I really would like an OT that has these 8 skill sets.
Right.
And then I interview, and none of them have all 8 skill sets. But I look at the one that says, wow, you've got really strong skill sets here. How can I fill in over here? Maybe I give this part of the job to somebody else, or I take on those clients, that kind of thing. I do the same thing with my dogs. So when I say, okay, what is the job that my dog is going to fulfill? That can look very different because my client population is different. Sometimes I'm working with a 5-year-old, sometimes I'm working with a 65-year-old. And those are very different sessions. So we create a profile. Here's the job description. Here are the things that I really need. And then we start looking at our dogs. And in the ideal world, if somebody is just starting out, they don't have a dog yet, they should be looking at breed specific traits because people tend to pick the dogs they think are the cutest, or I want a small dog. And so they pick up a Chihuahua.
Oh, yeah.
And that is not necessarily the best choice. So the big thing is we look at breed specific traits. Who are the dogs who really like to work and enjoy themselves? And, if I'm a mental health provider that really does do talk therapy, I probably want a lap dog, right? A King Charles Cavalier, a Lhasa, a dog that is going to sit in my lap and just be happy being pet. But if I am working in a spinal cord injury unit and I've got people that are really down and depressed and don't have a whole lot of things to look forward to because this new injury has changed their entire life. I don't need a dog that needs to be pet. These are individuals that can't move their arms. Um, I do want a dog who barks. I want a dog that is gleeful and excited when that client walks in the door. I want the dogs like, oh, that is the dog that I want. Because for a lot of clients, whether it is that person who has lost hope, or if it is a 12-year-old kid that has been in 22 foster homes and nobody's ever been happy to see him before because he has behavior, that initial meeting and noisiness and excitement from my dog, that is when I start making the relationship. And that is when they get excited. And then they're looking forward to it because my dog is excited to see them. They think about that. They describe that to their friends, their family, and they want to come back, right? So,
Melissa, just give me 1 second, sorry,
sure.
because our meeting will just end because we only had like 30 minutes. So I'm gonna just restart it. I'm so
Okay.
sorry about that. I don't even know like if we can, like I need to learn that. But anyway, yes, I'm gonna just restart it. That's okay
Okay.
for you?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let me just stop the recording so it goes.